afraid of the camera somehow. They were timid. And at some point they got better. They started knowing me and they started cooperating with me, but I was never, I could not show the things that I really wanted to show. So if we go further down, and of course I went to the mosques, the separation between, men and women. Very much interested in Islam and practicing very strict Islam. Now, these girls actually were much more fun. They were fashion designers. So they were like sketching, women with a hijab. And so they're much more free with their, the body language, as you see. But then the other one, again, they had these beautiful saris, they had this beautiful party, and I wanted to photograph them. I had to really work hard to get the people from the back, so only their hair shows, their faces doesn't show. As long as their faces doesn't show, it's okay for their hair to show. So I was like questioning all of this with these photographs.
Nothing to say about this one? Okay.
No, I mean,
we'll move on.
About it.
We'll move on. So then this is one of your installations.
That was a later installation. It's called Inside Outside. When you walk in the big,
this was in conjunction with PhotoFest, right,
yes,
in Houston?
Yeah. When you walk on the large cities of Iran, you mostly see the portraits of the martyrs. Women are not portrayed at all. Men who have died actually are beautifully painted on the walls like murals. So it's a little bit suffocating actually when you walk. So I created a public space where I actually enlarged all of these photographs of the martyrs that I had seen on the streets and sort of filled up the hallway with their images. So I wanted for the viewer to feel, how does it feel not to see any other image except the martyrs, because it does actually depresses you. And then there was also an audio where you hear the music. The music was outlawed for a while when Khomeini came to power, and then again, people were depressed. They were invading their houses for having parties and things like that. So they sort of became much more relaxed. Now, when you are actually on the streets, you hear the azan, this morning prayers, and then all of a sudden you hear all this Western music coming out from, the taxis and the cars and everything. So the combination of these are very interesting. So I actually created the audio with all of this mix of the sounds, where people walking on this hallway, looking at this martyr images and listening to music that could be Western music actually.
And this seems to be a central theme throughout your work, this
Yes.
sort of disjunctive quality between the strict tradition and where the contemporary world has gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much paradoxes that I see that I want to sort of bring out. And I think what happens in America, unfortunately, is that the focus of the media is so narrow and only political. And we don't never get to see the Islam that's practiced in different, we usually generalize Islam actually. Islam is practiced in different countries differently. From culture to culture it changes. And so by actually bringing that to the West, and I do show in Dubai and Sharjah and all of those places, but for me, because I'm sort of lived here for such a long time, I do not appreciate when the media generalizes all the Muslim countries in one place, So I have I have this dilemma between opposing poles, from Iranian American or Muslim American looking at it. I do not appreciate, what we do in America as this narrow focus. But as an American Iranian also, I do not appreciate the radical Islam and what's happening with the, treatment of women in different countries. So, I am kind of a mix of two, and I think my work actually shows that. So this was the house. This was a room, which was a private space of a contemporary Iranian home. I was trying to recreate that with the Persian carpets and everything. And then I showed a slideshow of the images that I have taken during my trips to Iran, so you would be able to see what's going on with the youth culture in Iran. So that was the installation.
This we've already seen.
This we already talked about.
Okay. So this takes us actually to the series that we have represented in the Jameel Prize exhibition, the works that you call maxiatures.
Yes.
So why don't we start with this one? Tell us a little bit. How did you get this idea in the first place?
Okay. I was looking at a Persian miniature book, and I looked at it and I saw that they're very secular, actually, art practice at 14th, 15th century. You never see any sort of a mullah or depiction of Prophet Muhammad or anything. You do see some of them, but in maybe later years. But basically, it was a secular practice because, and it was only exclusive to certain audience, that of the court itself. So again, going back to the private spaces of the homes, I wanted to bring that and sort of probably open these spaces for the viewer to have a glance inside the houses of the Iranian. But also I wanted to show how the public and the private changes, because this is actually, if you pay attention, there is a guy looking from one of the windows and looking at the harem. This used to be a harem with all the women nude. And what is actually curious is that at that time they could show or depict actually women sort of naked. But I could not as a photographer, because not only I would put in danger my sitters, and also I would not be able to show it. So I had to cover my women inside the pool. And then also it was inspired by, as you probably read by the image actually, it was actually inspired by walking on the beaches of Caspian Sea, which is a resort area. The men were roaming around with bathing suits and their sons and everything, but women were all covered. So I had to depict that, and not only that, I think I'm subverting the glance in a way, because now we're looking at a male figure rather than a nude male figure rather than a woman nude figure.
And there's a lot of humor in these works. I know the reaction, certainly when I take people through the show. And there's
humor actually invites people to ask questions and sort of get into the image. So I love the idea of humor in my work. Actually.
And also, I mean, I think these more than your previous works, they're a lot more filled with detail, subtle details, and a lot to discover. That you just can't look at it and get it all in one viewing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And many of the Persian miniatures have very much small details. They were only 7 by 10 inches. You looked at them with a magnifying glass. And when I actually looked at all these images on my monitor, I started appreciating the artwork of those artists in the 14th, 15th century. So by what I call it maxiature, because I'm maximizing the artwork that used to be just this small. By of course 21st century digital technology, you can appreciate what they went through, because they all actually, many of them went blind at the very age of like 20, 30, because they had to work with the candlelight, and they had to work with very thin brushes, and to do the details, we don't appreciate what they did really. So I feel like I'm collaborating with the 14th, 15th century artists, making this. And when I was walking on the streets of Iran, and I looked at this image, and I'm like, what would have Iran looked like if if we bring all those background and all those sort of a structural design, architectural design, and put the new people of the 21st century interacting with the meticulously painted figures of the 14th century. So that's where this came about, actually, where the whole idea of maxiature came about.
And here's another one. We have a detail. Movie set.
Movie set.
Yeah. So
again, there's some details that's overlooked because you do not know about the culture. The directors, the film directors in Iran, they really have to be careful because there's a gender separation. You cannot touch, male and female cannot touch each other. So when a war hero comes back home, the mother cannot hug his son. You know, that part is sort of only suggested. And this one, I started like just a simple dropping of the book. The boy tried to, you know, pick up the book and hold hands with the girl. It's something very simple to you guys, but for them, it's very important. So it's what is suggested is more powerful than what is not suggested, what is not shown actually. So I work with those issues. So bring that to front of, you know, what is really happening. How do they make films in Iran, you know, after the revolution? How do you create a woman and a man in a bedroom set? Because the women are covered, right? You cannot show a woman without the cover. But of course, in a bedroom scene, you know, woman would not, theoretically, would not be covered. So I'm sort of bringing that into the images so people would ask questions and would know more about what's going on there.
And this, of course, is Fashion Week that is also in our exhibition.
Yes. I think the desire is the same everywhere, no matter whether you're living in a you know, Islamic country, restricted country, you're a Muslim, you're, you know, Christian. I felt like with my teenager series, there were something that was going on, as I said, like any teenager in the Western world. They are actually sort of, they have the same desires. They like, you know, the fashion, they like the music, they like the opposite sex and all that. So you see more fashionable people these days on the streets. And I thought, what would have happened if we had a, you know, runaway for a fashion show in Iran? Because now they are sort of modernizing and try to explore and sort of do whatever they can to create something Western. And you do have some private spaces where they show the fashion. So I thought, what would that look like? So there's a segregated male and female on the side. So I use that as you know, symbolic also.
And when I was working on, you know, the labels, I decided to, you know, Google hijab fashion, right? And there's quite a lot online.
Quite a lot,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, on the streets, you almost like, you see, almost it's like fashionable runways, because girls and boys, especially girls, actually they do their self-image. Even with the cover, you have this face open. So they really, one of the girls actually in Iran said, well, that's the canvas. This is my canvas. So they do all sorts of makeup, tattoos, anything that they can be different. You know, so when you go to Iran, when you look at the faces or their nail polishes, you know, whatever can be shown and attract each other, I guess, you know. So I thought that was very, very curious when I was there. This is the only image that's addressing boys. You know, the parties are always rated. Young people still drink alcohol. Young people still party. But it does get raided with the moral police. And they do take him to the mosques. And, you know, and they would punish them, like almost, this is actually from 14th century where they were punished, but I guess because they were not reciting Quran the right way, but I actually subverted that. So what you see on the actual large images, the parents always are called in to come and pay, so they would be releasing their children. And so I wanted to depict that, and if you pay attention, there's, you know, magazines, Western magazine, there's iPad, iPod, there's alcohol that was confiscated by moral police as evidences, you know. So again, there's so much difference between the inside and outside that I have to always address that. This is Love is in the Air, and again, it's about segregation, it's about segregated spaces between men and women.
And then the next series, Persian Delights.
Persian Delights is mostly, I have actually focused much more in the detailed pieces of the miniature, and I'm using my own figures. They sort of tell the stories One of them is Escape, you know, about repression of women, you know, and many of them actually addresses me as an Iranian American. If you go forward, there are a couple of them that really shows that more. This is like Heaven Cannot Wait. You know, we know about the 30 virgins that everybody, all the men actually commit suicide to go to heaven and to be with the virgins. This is really not true. And, you know, we make such a big deal out of it. So I wanted to sort of make fun of that. So I created Heaven Cannot Wait. So I guess these guys are waiting to go to heaven and meet with these, you know, virgins up there in the cloud. So, and the other one is Twin Towers with the 4 wives, you know, you're permitted to marry 4 wives. And the guy sitting down showing the tower, the Twin Towers that was on fire.
And the one on the left?
It's just about, you know, covering.
Similar to your self-portrait at the beginning.
Yes.
Now this one's a very unusual composition compared to the others.
Yeah.
It's more elaborate.
Yes. A river runs through it. When you go on the mountains, Tehran is in a valley, and when you go up on the mountains, they do go climbing. And it was very interesting for me because as I was photographing, I started from the bottom of the mountains and I went up. As we went up, the moral police did not, somehow they don't come up. So the relationship become closer. Men and women are actually touching hands, holding hands, walking around with each other, playing music louder. So I want to sort of depict that also. So that's just the river scene and the mountains, which we get more relaxed as we go up.
And the desert series. This is a recent project.
Yeah, this actually came about. This is my most recent series, and it actually came about after the 2009 election with Ahmadinejad, that people were, you know, killed on the streets, and also the Arab Spring, which followed suit, and you know what's happening in Syria, Egypt, and all those places. So I wanted to sort of depict that. I've taken a lot of photographs of the landscapes in Iran. So by bringing in the miniatures now, it's sort of different than the max pictures. With their interaction, now I'm sort of bringing in what's going on in the Middle East as we go on today. This one is a little bit different. It's also the affair. I felt like, you know, the man walks in and the woman is with another guy. So, and the woman in the center is protecting the other woman. So.
And who's the little boy figure there?
That was just a cherub, sort of.
A little cherub, yeah.
Helping the guy, helping the. And this one is very curious. I was in the southern part of Iran taking photographs, and I walk in this space, and I see this monumental piece, and like, and I'm thinking, this is an Islamic country. How could they, you know, how could this be over here? You know, it's like, I have to photograph this. Nobody would believe that there is something like this in the middle of the. One of the cities, actually, I mean, away from the city, of course. So I photographed them, and I was just really making fun of them.
Did you find out, though, the story of why it was there?
Yeah, I mean, I asked the tour guide, and he says, oh, this is the rock formation. It just happened to be like this. And I'm like, okay. I don't believe it, but you can tell me. So he didn't say anything else. And I didn't want to inquire anymore. And these are like recent self-portraits. Also, I'm working with the idea of hair. Why is the hair cannot be shown? I'm investigating that, researching that. It's not complete yet, but it's, you know, coming about.
I think this is our last image, right?
I don't know.
And it's a very recent work.
It's a recent work.
And it's a self-portrait.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, well, let's turn the house lights on and open it up for questions. I'm sure there are a lot of good questions from the audience. Are we passing a microphone? Yes, Katie Erickson has the mic. So
There's a person right here, I think.
Yes.
He has a question.
We have I'm sorry, where do we have a question? Oh, right here in the front row. Okay. Just use the mic because we're videotaping and recording.
As a chronicler of the recent history of Iran, as we all know, a relative moderate has been elected to the presidency. How do you see that affecting the future of Iran? Is there an undercurrent of desire amongst the younger generation for a more liberated society?
I was in Iran this summer, so I kept asking, are you guys voting? Are you guys voting? And many people, maybe young people, said no. We know they're gonna. It's already been decided. We're not gonna vote. We're not gonna vote. But I think after Rafsanjani dropped out of the election and he endorsed this guy who is a little bit moderate, people are so desperate these days. There is, even the very traditional, more religious people are not happy with the government. So they want to change. And I am hoping that change would come about because Iran cannot go on like this. It's destroying itself inside of itself, and they are overlooking 50% of, maybe even more, 50% of the people who do not approve of this government. Maybe the most religious conservative people are following the government, but you talk to everybody. I talk to the taxi drivers, I talk to more traditional people. They all are so desperate. They don't like this conversation about atomic energy that's going on. They want to change. And I think within the government, there's also a conflict. So it's not about if, when we hear that, oh, nothing's going to change because Khamenei, who is the supreme leader, is going to decide. Yes, he has the last word, but also within his own government, there's a lot of conflict going on. So it's not as if it's just one way of looking at it. We have to give them a chance to start, liberating a little bit more. During before Ahmadinejad Khatami, when he gave much more freedom to the young people, it was a completely different landscape. So we're hoping that at least we would get that, socially a little bit more liberated. We're hoping that the guy actually, the president just had a lecture and he said that he's not going to be raiding the private homes of the people, which people are desperate. You cannot do this with people. The private homes is very, sacred space, and when they raid them, it really infuriates people. But they cannot, of course, do anything at this point. But they're hoping that they have more freedom of media. They're looking forward to get more of that. Yes.
Hi, thank you for coming today. It's wonderful to listen to you. I know I speak for more than myself. I've got a question more along the lines of your technique. What is your favorite camera? What do you work with film? Do you work digitally? And it looks like from the images, are you combining ancient images with the photographic work? If you could just talk about your technique a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah, when actually David talked about the black and white, I was doing only film when I went back to Iran, and I was just starting my MFA work at the University of Houston when I started that series actually, and I was only working with film, and I personally liked the film and the outcome of, the look of the film. But for me, as an Iranian American who goes back to the country, digital has made my life so much easier because I do stage these photographs. I have to worry about how to, get them printed. And how do I get it out of the country? Because some of these images cannot be shown inside the country. So digital really has helped me. And so I'm mostly working with Canon 5D mostly. Last series that I did was Canon 5D.
We have a question right here.
I was just curious about how, and by the way, I just so enjoy your work, and I'm so glad that you've come here, because it's just so charming, but it is subversive, obviously. So I'm wondering if there are any reactions to your work in Iran. I mean, is it reviewed? Are people aware of it? I mean, obviously you've been recognized here in the United States, so there must be some pride about that, but I'm